He'll make it for sure. Now that's why I backed him on Tap Touch.
Hey, Luke!
Yes, Gene Simmons?
He's probably the best when it comes to this stuff!
Thanks, Gene.
You've got the touch! You got the touch, you got the power. Got the touch? Choose Tap Touch. Better your bet. Download the app today.
Chances are you're about to lose. For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.
Hoops Heaven proudly brings to you Basketball Hustle.
Ellis fumbled the ball. 2 on the shot clock. Goes up a prayer. Yes! As he was falling to the ground, it's a 3. He shot it literally from the hip.
Definitely a highlight.
Here come the Billikens. 4 on 2. McCall. Ellis. Left corner.
We missed out.
Bang! From way down under. Cody Ellis.
Now it's time for another episode of Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle.
Hello and welcome to Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle for another week, and we're probably not that surprised, but we always thought that whoever lost that game on Saturday night, Cody, we might see some fallout, and we've seen that, unfortunately, with Mike Kelly losing his job at the South East Melbourne Phoenix, so that'll be obviously a big talking point for us this week. The team that they lost against, Tyrell Harrison, showed exactly why we thought he might be a dominant force this season for the Brisbane Bullets as they got their first win. Illawarra Hawks, they made another hell of a statement. They're the most fun team, but also the best team, I think, in the NBL right now. We saw a couple of huge wins for the Sydney Kings and Melbourne United on Sunday. The Perth Wildcats, they hit back in Cairns, and it was Bryce Cotton and Christian Doolittle doing the damage. Gee, the Cairns Taipans look a lot different without Taran Armstrong. Yeah. Cody, they're almost a contender with him, and unfortunately probably a wooden spoon contender without him, unfortunately. Mixed weekend for the Adelaide 36ers, but the good news is Montrezl Harrell looks like he's getting very close to signing on for the rest of the season. And we need to discuss why teams can't inbound the basketball at the end of games, Cody. Yeah. You need to give us a little bit of a lesson from somebody that's been there and done it. So that's a lot for us to get through. We're here, as always, thanks to Hoops 7, and we'll try to help you find some winners thanks to Tab Touch. I'm Chris Pike, but the man you've all tuned in to hear from, the former Illawarra Hawks and Sydney Kings forward Cody Ellis. That's a lot to get through just in the opening segment.
Yes, it certainly is, mate. Yeah, look, lots going on this round, and look, not necessarily the best round on the court all over, but yeah, look, plenty to talk about, which is always fun.
No, you're right. Not a lot of close games, unfortunately. No. A lot of blowouts, and the close game was the one between the two winless teams, and that one sort of went down. It was almost like who wanted to lose it, the most in the end, because the Brisbane Bullets almost threw it away at the finish with a pretty ugly last couple of minutes. But we'll go through the results and then we'll start breaking things down. Started back on Thursday night, and it was almost like who was left standing with the Cairns Taipans without Taran Armstrong and Tanner Groves, and the Perth Wildcats without Keanu Pinder, but the Wildcats got the win 90-87. Then on Friday night, the Adelaide 36ers looked terrific. They beat the Sydney Kings 89-79, and then the Illawarra Hawks, they handed the Tasmania Jack Jumpers their biggest ever NBL defeat, 109-76, and then the Brisbane Bullets, they got on the board 87-85 against the South East Melbourne Phoenix, and then a couple of blowouts on Sunday, as I mentioned. The Sydney Kings beating the Cairns Taipans 99-73, and then Melbourne United, all the damage done in the second half here. 106-79 over the 36ers. Obviously, what's going on at the Phoenix is a big talking point, but I want to start on those Sunday games, Cody. Big wins for Melbourne and Sydney. United hammering, it just looked like an exhausted 36ers team, and you can understand why, by 27 points, and then just highlighted again. I know that the Taipans are missing Tanner Groves as well inside, but it just to me highlights how much they miss Taran Armstrong as their point guard. They lost by 26 points. What did you make of those two big Sunday wins for Melbourne and Sydney?
Yeah, look, I didn't expect two complete blowouts like that. I'm not going to lie to you. So, look, I mean, the Kings, I figured they would take care of business. That was probably going to happen with Armstrong out for sure. I mean, Cairns do look like a completely different team without him in the lineup. Him running the show, you're right, they look like almost a contender for a title. And without him, they just don't have as good as Kyle Adams been for them, and being that backup role. That's exactly what he is. He's kind of that backup point guard right now.
And interesting, he still played as a backup.
Yeah.
He didn't even start.
No,
which was interesting.
It was. But then you've got guys handling the ball probably a lot more than they should be, and you got guys out of position. So it makes it so hard.
It was mostly sort of Jonah Antonio and Rob Edwards doing a lot of ball handling.
Yep, and then, tire Rob Edwards out and he's forcing some shots and not necessarily getting the good looks that he got when we saw Taran in the lineup. So, look, it's not overly concerning because that's kind of what we expected without Armstrong in the lineup. And, they said that he rolled his ankle before the game last week, but he got through that one fine and was still had an elite game. So I'm not overly sure, unless he retweaked it during the week, why he couldn't have played one of these games. But
and apparently he's not playing this week.
Is that right? See, I mean, there's all this talk about him being this NBA talent, but he's missed so many games already just in his short career in the NBL.
You need to be able to stay on the court, don't you?
If you can't stay on the court in the NBL with a 28 game season, how are you going to do it in an 82 game season? So, I'm not sure what's going on, or if it's just just a bad luck of bad injuries for him, or what's going on, or if he needs to figure out how to either know that it's just all right, it's just going to be sore, but I'm not going to do damage to it and play through that kind of a thing. Because
an ankle can be like that, can't it? You
Very
can tape up an ankle and keep it in position. Your movement might not be quite perfect, but you can play through the pain. Whereas if it's a soft tissue, you just can't because you simply can't move. But maybe with an ankle, he needs to be able to play through it. Yeah,
possibly. But again, we're not overly sure if there's damage to his ligaments and stuff like that. You don't want to be testing the waters on that this early in the season. So, interesting one. But they need to figure out how to play without him if he's going to be missing games, unfortunately. Because, they look like two completely different teams.
Yes. All right, let's get to the big news of the week at the South East Melbourne Phoenix. And we always felt like potentially the loser of that Phoenix and Brisbane game, the coach might be in a fair bit of trouble. And Mike Kelly has since lost his job. It was very quick. It was the very next morning after that loss on Saturday night. I think we sat here last week and we were surprised that perhaps didn't happen last week after how bad the team looked against Adelaide. So it's not a great surprise. It's still unfortunate because Mike Kelly's one of the best men in basketball. You spent a little bit of time with him when you did go up to Cairns for a little bit as well. I don't think you'll find anyone that doesn't like him as a person. He's got a great basketball brain as well, but for whatever reason, it doesn't quite translate to inspiring his players. I mean, you see some coaches, and I spoke to Damien Martin about this a couple of days ago, and he talked about how Trevor Gleeson was never nice to you, and you didn't necessarily like Trevor as your coach, but you would still want to go out there and do everything he wanted you to do, and you would want to run through a brick wall for him. I think the history tells us now that perhaps Mike Kelly's teams, his players, don't want to go and run through a brick wall for him. I have no idea why, but he just can't seem to inspire that in his players. And this is his 5th season as a head coach, and he's already had 3 wooden spoons, and he was on track for a 4th.
Oh, and a coach of the year.
And a coach of the year, the one out of that. So, unfortunately, I think his record speaks for itself now, 40 and 85. It doesn't read great. Lots of digest there. Let me... You can hear Albus in the background. We might need to take his squeaky toys away. But firstly, what was your reaction when you found out on Sunday, Cody?
Oh, look, not surprised. And I reckon that would have been a discussion pretty much straight after the game. So that's not overly surprising or anything like that. I think that I kind of figured they would always give him till Brisbane to figure it out, especially with how Brisbane were tracking to, because you're right, it was always going to be kind of that whoever lost that, one of those coaches was probably going to be in trouble. Unfortunately for Mike, it was him, and you're right, look, one of the nicest blokes you're ever going to meet. Absolutely. And great basketball brain, like you said, but can't quite translate to the head coaching role, unfortunately. And look, we see that a lot from people. You know, being a head coach is just a whole different kettle of fish. It's there's a lot on your plate.
It's almost not actually about the coaching, is it? It's more about managing your players and actually almost being a counsellor in some ways to know how to actually get the best out of the players. Yeah,
for sure. And knowing, when to and how to push buttons and, figure out how to, especially these days, because there's so many different ways people like to be coached, and they respond to different things. And I mean, look back, even when I was younger, it was pretty much just every coach was just yell and scream, and that was it. It was just get you to do what they want straight out of fear, basically. It's a lot different these days. People react differently.
Well, your dad was a great example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to yell and scream.
Yes.
Seen plenty of broken whiteboards in locker rooms. So, but yeah, look, it's one of those things, unfortunately. And you're right, 40 and 85 record is not a great. It's not great. It's something that's kind of hard to come back from, unfortunately. But I expect him to be on a coaching staff somewhere, because I mean he's got some great basketball knowledge, and he's been around the league. He understands the league, and proven that he's been a great assistant around the league already as well. So hopefully he can find a gig somewhere, and we can keep him in the league in some capacity.
You feel like it's the right decision though? Yeah,
I do. He clearly wasn't working. I think with that loss, that's 9 straight going back to last season. Yeah. I think now, so that's tough, and that would be now 1-14 in the last 15 games. So that's not ideal. And there's not too many leagues in the world where you can have a record like that and still keep your job, unfortunately. And it is. It's we're in that business of players win games and coaches lose them. Yeah. So it's just how it is, and that's what you're signing up for. And look, I think for the club in general, it was the right decision.
Sam McKinnon is now the person to take over, at least in the interim. Second time he's done this. Yep. I expect it to last a bit longer than it did in Brisbane. I think it was 2 games in Brisbane before. Then, in a strange set of circumstances, it ended up being Greg Vanderjagt. They're in an interesting position. Do they try to make a move quickly where they bring somebody else in from the outside, or do they use this as a way for Sam to make an audition to see if he can do the job full time?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a difficult one because the club in general, since they've come into the league, has not been overly successful. They've had a couple good cracks at it with some pretty good teams, but there's, like you said, few wooden spoons in there, unfortunately. And one of our good mates in Simon Mitchell had a couple of those teams where just a terrible luck of, run of injuries and that kind of a thing. So,
and one season he'll want me to point out that they were leading at halftime in Game 3 against Melbourne United, away from potentially winning a championship, because they would have come up against the Bryce Cottonless Wildcats in the grand final that year. So,
well, and that's it. That's exactly it. Like I said, they've had that close call, and I think they've probably had squads that could have been in that same situation and been those title contenders, but just that bad run of injuries. And like I always say, luck does come. It is just part of the game, unfortunately, and they've just not had that luck in the past few years. But it's a tough one. It depends on what the I guess Simon really wants to do with the club moving forward. I mean, McKinnon had really put himself out there with Brisbane and said that he wants to coach.
He said he didn't want to be a GM of basketball anymore. He wanted to be a coach. Yep. So he went and coached in New Zealand this past season as well, and now he's in this position again. So yeah.
So I mean, look, there's some pretty great coaches' names being thrown around by certain people, and I'm sure there's some phone calls that they'll be making. Just some proven coaches, and I think they're kind of in a position where they probably need a bit of a proven coach at the moment.
Yeah, could you bring somebody in mid-season?
It'd be tough. It would be tough. I think McKinnon is going to change bits and pieces for sure, but I don't think he's going to completely throw out everything they've done so far.
It's hard if he's still in the same playing group. There's not much you can change.
Not a whole lot. There certainly is some bits and pieces that you can change, but to kind of completely start fresh is tough. Even as early as it is in the season, it's still very difficult to do. So,
well, especially if it's a coach that's already coaching a season that's started, you wouldn't be able to get them out of their current deal to get them. So it would have to be somebody that's not coaching right now. I mean, the only one that springs to mind, and I know his name's been thrown around a little bit, is Chase Buford, and because he knows the league, could it work where he comes in mid-season, or do you need to work with this group over a pre-season before you coach them?
Look, I think a guy like Chase could come in and with the roster they've got, I think he could come in and do some good things with it for sure.
He knows Derek Walden and Jordan Hunter and Angus Glover, and so he knows a lot of the players.
Yeah, and he was pretty heavily invested in all of those guys, and a big reason why they kind of had the seasons they did. So, And a guy like Nathan Sobey fits into his mould of play perfectly, I think. So, look, there's certainly some pieces there that fit well, but again, it just depends on what Simon and the club really want to do and how they want to move forward with this, and if they want to give McKinnon a chance, because look, I think he's certainly earned it.
Probably a question we should be asking Simon, aren't they? No, he's had a big week, but he has still helped us out with his votes, which we'll get to later in our Player of the Year award. It was interesting what happened with Nathan Sobey last week. There was a lot of talk about the way he left Brisbane and Justin Schuller's comments afterwards, and didn't the league like pumping up the fact that he called it a dog shot? And I think you could tell. I don't know if you saw his pre-game interview, but you could tell that Sobey was absolutely sick of talking about it by that stage and was well and truly ready to move on. But I don't know if it was the right move to not start him in that game. He had a lot of pent up. I don't know what the word is.
Energy, frustration.
Yes, a bit of everything. So I feel like he had to start in that game.
Yes.
And then, even if you don't start him, I felt like we talked about last week, Angus Glover had to be the one in the starting lineup. If you made a change to the starting lineup, I found it very surprising they went with Malik Lewis to have such a big lineup, because he's out there with Wieskamp, and that's pretty big. And then you got Hunter and Matt Hurd as well. It didn't work any way that you look at it, because Malik didn't necessarily have a great impact, and Sobey had a really tough night. He looked like he was playing with the weight of the world on his shoulders, and 5 points, 1 of 7. Didn't force a lot of shots, but he did force one really late on the inbounds pass where he's completely off balance. And
he almost tripped over himself.
He did, and he took a 3, and then he was taken out of the game straight after that, and we didn't see him again. So it was a really tough night for him. What did you make of how it all played out?
Yeah, look, there was a lot. Sorry, we've got Albus in the background making all kinds of noise, wanting to run on the treadmill.
It is. He's playing. So if you do hear funny noises, it's just our little co-host Albus. Yes. He's very full of energy this morning.
Yes, he is. Look, we kind of said it last week on the show that we wouldn't see Sobey not starting because, I mean, he started pretty much his whole career, really. Yes. And, look, whether him coming off the bench just completely threw a spanner in the works. He already had so much going on that probably just tipped it over the edge a little bit. He's obviously not had his best season so far, but he was a complete non-factor. And look, I thought Malik Lewis came in. I thought he was decent defensively for them, but again, just on the other end, doesn't really give them anything. And that's kind of what they needed was kind of that scoring punch. And with him and Wieskamp on at the same time, they didn't really have that extra scoring punch. So look, a couple of odd little lineups, but look, at the end of the day, Mike had to figure something out and change something because it clearly wasn't working for them. So, I mean, I was completely sick of hearing all the back and forth. I know those two guys, were completely over it too and just wanted to get the game on. But, look, it was certainly blown a bit too far out of proportion, I think. And, talking to some people, and they were just like on edge thinking that there was going to be almost a fist fight with it, and, are they going to shake hands after the game and all this kind of a thing?
I actually didn't look post game. Did they?
I didn't see it. I'm sure they would have though. Like I said, I think it was blown way out of proportion for what it actually was. But look, never really like to see that. But you
don't see it very often.
No,
especially where a player feels slighted by a coach. You don't see that very often.
No, not too often at all. So I don't know. It was an interesting one, and obviously the league's got to try and get eyes on games, and that's one way to do it. But it was just not a good night all around for the Phoenix.
No. Last thing on them. Do you see hope for them? They're 0-5. We saw the Hawks. They were in a very similar position last year, and they almost made a championship series after they made their coaching change. Do you see hope for them, at least for this season? Yeah, look, I think it's probably going to be a tough one to push for the 6. But I think if they can start to make strides, either with McKinnon or if they do bring in a new coach, I think, I said at the start of our, start of the season on our podcast here that I do like their squad. I think you had them in the top 6, didn't you?
I did, I did. I thought they were going to scrape into that 5 or 6 spot. And I do like their squad. Look, like they've got some really good pieces. I think if they can figure out how to get Walton and Sobey to play together and actually be their elite selves, then they're going to be tough. They don't give much on defense at all from the squad, just in general. But look, I think they do have some decent pieces. So Yeah, look, I think there is some hope for them, but I think at this point it's just kind of building a bit more of a better foundation moving forward rather than trying to push for a top 4, top 6 at this point.
I was going to take a break because I thought we needed to get Elvis under control, but he might have sorted himself out.
Tied himself.
So let's talk about the team that beat them on Saturday night, and then we will take our first break. The Brisbane Bullets got their first win of the season. Let's start with Tyrell Harrison, because that was as dominant a performance from a big man as we are probably ever going to see in the NBL. 21 points, 17 rebounds, 12 offensive rebounds, most ever by a player in a 40-minute NBL game. He had more offensive rebounds on his own than the Phoenix did as a team. We thought he was going to have a breakout season. Bit of a slow start, and I feel like maybe it wasn't him, it was more the team that wasn't enabling him to shine in the first 3 games. But, he had a big say in the game.
Oh, he was awesome. He was awesome. And just everywhere. Phoenix just couldn't box him out. You know, they kept trying and, you know, they'd throw a body at him, but he's just too big and his positioning was too good. And he could have had 40 because the amount of layups he missed was crazy. Yeah, it could have been close to a 40-20 game.
Which is why he also got so many offensive rebounds.
Well, exactly. So, look, I thought he was great, and that's the Tyrell Harrison that we thought we were going to get this year. Probably not quite that dominant, but look, he's clearly now shown that he can do that. So, interesting to see how he goes up against some of the better bigs around the league. Yeah, look, he was unreal. He was great.
So was James Bateman. So, speaking to those of the Bullets over the past week, he went into Justin Schiller's office early last week and said, maybe it's the best thing to take the pressure off everybody if I come off the bench. Let's put Mitch Norton into the starting lineup because he can set the tone for us from the start. And it worked because Norto was terrific. And we'll see later that Damien Martin rated his defensive performance very, very highly. And he took some massive charges at important points in the game. And Norto set the tone. But then Bateman was able to come on and hit a 3. I think it was the 3 late in the first quarter that broke a 14-0 run for the Phoenix. So he made an instant impact. I think he hit 3 more threes in the second quarter, and then he made six of them for the game. So he showed what he's capable of, and maybe that's the way forward, that he does come off and be that scoring punch off the bench, and you have Norto setting the tone, especially without Sam McDaniel. They need somebody to be that defensive presence from the start. So that seemed to work.
Yeah, certainly did. And Norto doing Norto things, you know, just completely impacting the game without, you know, bothering the stat sheet too much.
And while shooting badly, he still had a big impact.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he certainly wasn't through a lack of trying because he was getting them up, wasn't he? But I mean, he was getting open shots, and those are shots that Norto will normally knock down. So I was glad that he kept letting it ride because, you know, you don't want to see confidence come out of a guy like that. And he was, super impactful. And then, Bateman come off the bench and almost was definitely a lot better coming off the bench and kind of seeing how the game's playing out and then coming off and being that scoring punch, because you do need firepower off the bench as well. You can't have a great team with no bench scoring or anything like that. You need guys coming off the bench that are a threat, so that when rotations do come in, then you know, you've still got guys on the floor that can put the ball in the hole. And he was great, and that's awesome that, you know, he's gone to Schuler and said, hey, look, I think this is what we should do, and he's sacrificing, you know, coming off the bench. And I know lots of guys, and especially imports, don't want to do that. So that's awesome, and that's great coming from your import.
To me, the key, as good as Harrison and Bateman were for the Bullets, was that they looked to have a team where their leaders stepped up. So we talked about Norto, but Josh Bannan, he doesn't necessarily need to put up big numbers, but he seems to be a guy that brings everything together and almost holds everyone to account as well for a second-year player. He's willing to call everyone out if they're not doing the right thing. And Casey Prather, I think, is showing good leadership as well. So their leaders seem to stand up too.
Yeah, they certainly were. All 3 of those guys were great. Saw another dunk from Casey, which is... Yeah, all Casey slowly coming back, which is fun. And then, Bannan was great. You know, I think he does a really good job of not letting what's going on affect him too much. I think that, you know, whether it's going great or really bad, he's kind of very even-keeled and does a really good job of getting guys into huddles and stuff like that. And again, that's certainly coming from working with Norto for a couple of years now. And, look, those 3 guys have been a great leadership group. I think that's such an underrated thing in teams, is having a good leadership group, and obviously led by Norto, who's been there, done that, and is one of the best leaders going around the league. So, look, they were all great, and I think for them to continue improving, those guys need to be showing up every single night.
Did you see enough from the Bullets to suggest they can make themselves maybe not a championship contender, but at least a top 6 contender? Or
not really, because you've got to look at their opponents as well in a struggling Phoenix team. At the moment, they're just not quite there. I think watching that game, while it was a 2-point game, a close game doesn't necessarily mean it's a good game. So we saw a couple of those this weekend. So look, I still think those two teams are a step and a half behind everyone else at the moment. But I mean, getting your first win on the board can just boost your confidence, and all of a sudden everyone's feeling a bit better about themselves, and you go into games with a bit more confidence, and that can completely change a team. So it'll be interesting to see how they go this weekend. Yeah, look, I still think at the moment there's a bit of a gap between the rest of the league.
All right, speaking of the rest of the league, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about what we saw from everybody else in round 4.
Sounds good.
Can you picture the first goal before the ball has even bounced? Can you read the footy future in the mullet of a full forward? You've got the touch. Got the touch? Download the Tab Touch app today.
You win some, you lose more.
Okay, back on Hoop 7's basketball hustle, Cody, and we spoke about Taran Armstrong earlier, so we don't need to go back about how much the Cairns Taipans are missing him, but what it does highlight, and Adam Ford mentioned this after the game on Sunday, is that they're not necessarily playing with the same playing field that everybody else is. Right. So the New Zealand Breakers have now signed Taco Fall for the rest of the season just to be a training player with them. So the Cairns Taipans can't do something like that. No. The Cairns Taipans can't do what the Perth Wildcats have done and have an replacement import in waiting with Todd Withers. They can't go out and sign somebody like Montrezl Harrell if they've got an injury to, say, Tanner Groves.
Yep.
So they can't do what the other teams can do. Is that just the reality that they have to live with, and they just have to keep finding ways to try to find these sort of nuggets that Adam Ford can find?
Yeah, look, I think so. I think Cairns and Illawarra are the two teams that are kind of not quite on the same playing field as the rest of the league.
I think Brisbane might be around there.
Brisbane's probably...
I don't know if Brisbane have the same resources.
Yeah, they're probably similar for sure. But yeah, look, it's tough. You just got to work with what you've given, really. I mean, there's no real way around it, unfortunately, unless you've got guys willing to spend money and ownership groups willing to spend that money to go out and do that. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult, but also the guys that you recruit need to be able to play. That's the other thing.
It just highlights when they have injuries, though, doesn't it? So they can't replace somebody like Tanner Groves now that he's out for... He could be out for a month with his calf injury, but they just can't replace him.
Yeah, it's tough. It is really tough, and it's brutal. And like you said, we see Jarrell Martin go down for what was 6 weeks at the time, and they bring in former 6th man of the year in Montrezl Harrell from the NBA. So, like you said, Cairns can't really do that kind of a thing. They don't have quite the same money to be able to throw around, and it is difficult. And then you get to this kind of a thing, and you're really out of luck. Honestly, that's kind of how it is, and it's got to be frustrating. And obviously, I played for Illawarra, so I kind of understand that side of things, and it's tough because when you got guys go down, there's someone else just has to step up in their place, and that's kind of what Cairns have to do, but they just don't quite have the depth either. No,
it's tough, and we saw the difference because we saw how good they were the week before when they beat Melbourne and Tasmania. But then these losses, the Wildcats one was. I mean, they were competitive, but again, this final scoreline probably flattered them.
Yeah, they were never really
a little bit. Yeah, and then they weren't in the game from the start against the Kings. It just, they just need a fully healthy squad. They just unfortunately can't quite compete unless they've got it.
No, and that's the thing. That's kind of what they're doing is what little money they do have to throw around. They're kind of throwing at kind of their 5-6 guys and just hoping that the local guys can fill that void kind of 7 through 10. And it's not good when you're kind of scheduled 7 through 10 players are playing starter minutes because it's just you're not going to be able to compete, unfortunately. Not the way the league is now.
One of the teams they lost to last week, the Perth Wildcats on Thursday night. So we talked about the pressure they were under coming into this game, and then that was certainly magnified without Keanu Pinder out there because of the impact that he has and the role that he plays on the team. But Quite simply, it felt like Bryce Cotton and Christian Doolittle just weren't going to let the Wildcats lose that game. So Bryce's numbers speak for themselves. 35 points, 7 of 10 from 3. He was unguardable, really. He was on fire. But Christian Doolittle has this presence about him where he's such a competitor, where he just makes things happen. And I thought he was every bit as important. 19 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, and playing the 5 spot. So he was the one that started. He moved up into that Keanu Pinter spot. They didn't go for an Almanza or a O'Quare or somebody else in that spot. He moved up to play big, or maybe Jesse did. Either way, one of them was playing the 5 spot out of position. But, gee, those two guys just weren't going to let them lose that game, were they?
No, they weren't. And, look, Bryce got a couple of little easy looks early, and then that's floodgates just opened up for him. And you can't give a guy like that open looks early, because it's going to be a long night for you. And then you're right, they had no one that could really guard him. Yeah, Doolittle. I mean, I feel like I say it every week. He's one of my favourite players in the league and has been since last year. And he just does a lot of the little things. And we're seeing this year him stepping up scoring as well. Yes. And his little mid-range is just absolutely money. Like, he does so well down on the block. He just gets to his spot. He knows where he wants to get to, and he just slowly, methodically gets to his spot and just rises up and shoots over people because he's bigger usually than the guys guarding him, and he's too quick off the dribble and can stretch the floor too well if he's playing that 5 spot like he did in Cairns.
He can pretty much play 2, 3, 4 or 5. Yeah. I mean, that's a hell of a weapon to have.
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly a luxury that they've got with the Cats. So, look, he's just as important as Bryce in this team, and he's been probably their most consistent all season. We've seen Bryce have great games. We've seen Keanu have that absolutely unbelievable first game. But we've seen both those guys kind of have a down game as well. And I think Doolittle's been the one that's just been the most consistent for them. Yeah. And it's because he does lots of little things that don't necessarily revolve around putting the ball in the hole. Yep. He crashes the boards hard. He's finding open guys. He's D'ing up. He's guarding, like I said, 2 through 5 really. And just that calm, composed head on the floor as well. And then you put Jesse out there with him too, and it's just the team seems to be going as well as with any other person on the floor. So he's done a great job of being able to get Bryce open. I thought he did a good job, being that screener as well. And again, we've seen that with Jesse. We saw it towards the end of last year where Bryce started going off is because Jesse was playing more minutes, getting him open properly, setting proper screens for him, which I think guys like Keanu need to figure out how to be able to do that for Bryce, just because I think that's where he can probably grow his game a bit more in being that effective screener, because he's such a big body and mobile and smart, and he can certainly do what Doolittle and Wagstaff do in getting Bryce open. So, yeah, look, it's the Cats look really good when Cotton and Doolittle are firing. Yeah.
You make a great point about Jesse. I think he's only 3 games now away from passing Ricky Grace on the all-time games list of the Wildcats, but he deserves to be playing. He's still an important player on this team, so they're lucky that he wanted to play on again this year because he still has a big impact.
Yeah, he certainly does. And look, he's obviously not going to be playing 30-something minutes a night, and I'm sure he'll tell you that he doesn't want to be doing that. But, look, every second he's on the floor, they're a better team. He's just, cool, calm, and collected. He knows the guys so well. He's been there, done that. Like you said, he's a couple of games away from passing Ricky on the all-time list, and that's a lot of games. So he's just that impactful player again without bothering the scoreboard. He can knock down that 3 for sure. He can get to his little spots and his pivots in the post and he's up and unders and all that. But again, like he's had games where he hasn't done any of that, but he's been one of the most impactful. Yes. So look, they're super lucky that he wanted to keep playing, and to have a guy like that who's so seasoned and just understands the game and just does all the little things and doesn't want to be the go-to guy or anything like that, but is willing to do all the dirty work and the little things.
Never has wanted to be it, has he?
No. He knows his role. He knows what he's good at, and he's great at those things. So he doesn't try and play out of his wheelhouse or anything like that. And again, that's a big part of why he's been around the league so long and why he's been so successful, and the teams he's been on have been so successful. So every club needs a guy like that.
The Adelaide 36ers, interesting weekend for them. So they They were very good against the Sydney Kings on Friday night at home to win that game. In fairness to the Kings, Jalen Adams hurt his back early in the game and really didn't have an impact and didn't play at all in the second half. And Xavier Cooks was well and truly under the weather, so he wasn't quite his usual self. But that's not Adelaide's problem. They could only beat what they were up against, and they were very impressive. But then on Sunday, they were pretty good in the first half. They still put up 52 points in the first half, but sometimes the scheduling can be a killer, and I don't think we'll be hearing any of them make an excuse after what we saw last year, so we don't want to see them go down that path again. But the reality is they were playing against a Melbourne team that was fresh, not having played in 7 days, playing at home, and I still think Melbourne are the worst team. The last team that you want to come up against coming off a loss because they respond so well. So, and then the 36ers having to travel to Melbourne playing less than, or just over 36 hours later. So they looked exhausted in the second half. So, I mean, I think you give them a pass just because of the circumstances. What do you make of their weekend?
Yeah, look, I mean, you can give them a pass for sure, but at the end of the day,
a pass in a way, but maybe not a 27 pass. Yeah.
No, and look, Melbourne looked really good.
Yes.
I mean, they looked really good on Sunday. But again, like you've got to be able to back up. You have to.
Yep.
You have to be able to back up with travel. And look, I understand it's not quite the NBA where you can just get on a charter flight and be there in a couple hours, and
it's only an hour flight from Adelaide to Melbourne.
It's not too bad, and look, the time difference isn't huge, which is great, but that's a tough double though.
Yes,
Kings and Melbourne is a tough double, but there's not too many easy beats around the league. It doesn't matter who you play, where you play, so. You're right. They just looked like they ran out of gas in that second half on Sunday, and it's tough to play at home on a Friday, get on a plane the next morning. You don't really get too much of a shoot around. No. You wouldn't get one on probably Sunday morning because of it's Sunday afternoon. So to get a shoot around in the morning would have to be pretty early, and realistically, recovery is probably more important at that point. So, yeah, look, I think you can give them a pass, but, yeah, look, that second half they just look like two different teams between first and second half, which is not ideal. So they've got to figure out how to kind of narrow that margin a bit and stay in those games.
A little bit is the Shea Lee effect as well, because he locked into DJ Vasiljevic in that game, and he got the job done. So he had been the leading scorer in the league up until that game, DJ, but he only had 8 points and 3 of 12 shooting, and that's what Shea can do. Yeah,
I mean, we've seen it so many times, right? That's just what he does. And I thought Ian Clark was actually really good as well.
Yes,
I think defensively he was he stepped up big time for them and did a really good job on Davis to start the game.
Yep.
I think kind of kept him out of it as well. So that's probably two of their better scorers that just kind of didn't really have an impact at all.
And by him doing that, it allowed Shea and Daly at times to focus on DJ, which was important.
They did a great job, and you're not going to find too many other teams in the league that have that combo of defender. So every team has nightmares coming up against those two.
Yes.
So they did a great job, as they always do.
Speaking of nightmares, Milton Doyle had a nightmare against Wani Swaka Lo Buluk and the Illawarra Hawks on Saturday night as well. We've never seen somebody lock down Milton Doyle like Wani did. So Milton had a horror night, 4 points. He shot 2 of 7, so even to only get 7 shots off is very low for him. He also had 7 turnovers. That's a hell of a defensive job from Wani.
Unreal. And, I think surely Wani is leading Defensive Player of the Year votes, and not just for us, but for the league, because he's been just unbelievable all season.
Yep.
And not just playing on the ball, but off ball. He's been physical. He's clearly worked on his body in the off season, even more so.
Yep.
He's up full court. He's basically sitting in the pants of his his opponent and annoying them all game.
And unlike Bull Kowal, he doesn't get in foul trouble.
No. So he doesn't. He does a really good job of not using his hands.
Yep.
I think he does a really good job of using his hips and his chest and getting in front. And I mean, he's been just so dominant defensively that to be able to guard a guy like Doyle that way and hold him to 4 points on 2 of 7 with 7 turnovers, because a lot of that's directly from what Wani's been doing. Yeah, absolutely. So That's unbelievable job, and completely took him out of the game, and just off the back of that is a big reason why they won it. And
it was the biggest ever loss for the Jack Jumpers in the NBL. So the Hawks won by 33 points. They're so fun to watch. They just put so many points on the board. They had another 109 points in the game, and they're not relying on any one guy to score either. So they had Sam Froling 21, Tyler Harvey 19, Dave O'Hickey was outstanding again, 15, Darius Days 15, HJ Lee 10, Trey Kell had a quieter game but still had 10. Gee, they're fun to watch. They're clicking right now in a way that no other team is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And everyone just has complete faith in the person next to them, and that's kind of what. When I was playing there, we made the grand final series. That's kind of how we played as well. And it's just, you've seen it with some of these successful teams, even the Kings teams with Chase Buford at the helm. Those guys just didn't matter who was scoring. Obviously, you had some studs in there, and which is what the Hawks do. But on any given night, anyone can be the top scorer for you. I think it was fun to see Sam Froling come out and be super aggressive, and just I think that he got the best of Magnay. By a long way. Yeah. And, look, they're just so fun. And if you've got a guy like Trey Kell only scoring 10 points and you win by 30, then that's a pretty good night for you.
Yes. The team they beat, the Jack Jumpers, they've had a couple of good wins this year, but I feel like they don't quite have the talent level that they did last year. And I mean, that's an obvious thing to say without Jack McVeigh, but even taking Jack out of it, I feel like, obviously, Gorjak Gak is a downgrade on Marcus Lee as their second centre with Magnay. But even if you combine the production of Craig Sword and Ruben Tarangi with trying to replace Jack McVeigh, they don't come close to doing that. Yeah. They are missing Sean McDonald, so I think we have to factor in that because he's a really important player to them. But they just don't... I feel like there's too much pressure on Jordan Crawford and Milton Doyle to put up too many points. They don't seem to have a natural third scoring option. Are you concerned for them?
A little bit. Look, it's starting to get a little concerning for sure. I think that you're right. They lost a lot from their championship team. Yeah. Obviously, losing McVeigh, who it's kind of like a team like South East losing Creaky. Yep. It's that same boat of import level player as a local, and they're hard to find. Kings have one in Zave. It's just not every team has the luxury of having that. Yeah. And to lose a guy like that is huge, and that really sucks. And he's doing his thing for Houston right now. He's been awesome and fun to see. So you're right. The pressure on Crawford and Doyle is, I think, too much at the moment. And I think they expected Craig Sword to come in and kind of help fill that void of Jack a little bit. Obviously, different positions, but to be that scoring punch and to kind of be that defender, and he just hasn't quite done any of that yet. We haven't really seen much from him at all, which is frustrating, I'm sure. And I'm sure, they've had talks to him, and unfortunately, as an import, you've got to produce, otherwise your job's on the line. So, if he has another couple games the kind of way he's going, it wouldn't overly surprise me if they released him and tried to find a different piece. Because they're certainly missing a piece or two, unfortunately. And look, bringing McDonald back in will be huge for them. I think he's he's kind of one of those scoring punches that we talk about coming off the bench. And defensively, he's great. So he's...
I still think he's some time away. I think it was not until December they weren't expecting him back.
Yeah, see, that's rough. And at that point, it's almost season done.
Could be,
If you lose too many games at that point of the season, it's really hard to dig your way out of that hole. So look, it's going to be interesting. I think it's an interesting round for them this week because, like I said, if Sword doesn't produce something, then he could be next on the chopping block, unfortunately.
Yes. Let's take our last break, Cody. I'll give you some time to think about why teams can't inbound the ball right now. We'll have that discussion after the break, and then we'll take a look at our votes and get stuck into round 5 in the NBL.
Yeah, perfect.
He'll make it for sure. That's why I backed him on Tap Touch.
You got the touch. You got the power. Got the touch? Choose Tap Touch. Better your bet. Download the app today.
Imagine what you could be buying instead.
Okay, back on Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle. I'm here with Cody Ellis, as always. Last segment, Cody. Let's have a discussion about inbounding the ball at the end of games. Yeah. It's costing teams wins right now, and it has been for a while. Yeah. When we go back to that, was it Game 2, Illawarra Melbourne last season when Kyle Adnan was put in a horrible position, and it cost Illawarra potentially the series in the end, and it continues to rear its head, and it almost cost Brisbane a game, and it potentially almost cost Justin Sillery's job on Saturday night if they didn't find a way to still win despite that turnover where they inexplicably threw it to Rocco Zakarski, who had it knocked out of his hand when I think it was Josh Bannan. He had Mitch Norton on his left, wide open, who had got away from his defender. I know it frustrates you. Why? I'll ask you the first question. Why are teams having so much trouble? And then I'll get you to explain how they can do it better.
Yeah, so like you said, the Hawks in Melbourne last year, and then even the grand final series.
Yes.
You know, there's a couple times where it happened, and was potentially the reason that Tassie win the series. You know, so it's tough. And then even the Cats and Cairns game, like. Cats couldn't inbound it and gave Cairns a shot to win it, you know, or to tie it and send it to overtime. And in a game where Cairns had no right to even be in the game. So it's super frustrating. I get very frustrated watching it. And every time that there's a late sideline inbound, I'm like, well, the other team better be ready and have a play to, you know, ready to go because it's going down the other end. And it's just so strange. I don't know if it's teams trying to reinvent the wheel with sideline plays or what, but guys just aren't getting open. I think that's the big thing, and that's kind of what I've seen the most is whether it's the big setting screens for the guards or what's happening. But yeah, guys are not getting open. And like you said, we saw Mitch Norton open and Bannan not be able to find him. Like you've got to have someone inbounding that is the most secure with the ball in their hand, you know. And I think, look, Bannan is probably one of those guys for sure.
He probably was, but they weren't expecting him to have to do it because they had Casey Prather to take that, and then he wasn't allowed to check back into the game, which I think might have thrown them off a little bit.
Oh, for sure. But you've got to be ready to step in and be able to do that. And if you're at that level, if you're in the NBL, you should be able to inbound the ball. Jeez, we even had it with the Senators last year, and I think our first game, you know, we had one where we almost lost the game because of a bad sideline inbounds. And yeah, look, it seems to keep happening. You know, guys need to be able to figure out how to get their defender on their back, and guys passing the ball need to lead them to where they want to get the ball. Like, you can't be throwing a dead chest pass to people because it gets stolen or deflected, or, you know, in Rocco's case, wasn't thrown quite high enough.
No.
You know, I think if you're throwing it to a kid who's 7'2" or 3", whatever he is, you can throw that thing pretty high.
Yes.
You know, he's going to be able to get it because all that needed to happen was really to touch the ball. You know, just grab it, and you're probably going to get fouled, and then that takes extra time off the clock, and then you can throw the ball off the rim in that second shot.
Yeah, because I think it was Malik Lewis that was the one guarding him.
Yeah,
so, I mean, he's got 7 inches on him.
Yeah.
So throw it 7 inches higher.
Yeah. But even Rocco there, like, he's way too close to the sideline. Yeah, like, you know, even if he had caught it, might have stepped out on the sideline anyway. Yep. So it's it's infuriating, and it's just constantly happening. And I think that's something that at this level shouldn't be happening. Maybe once in a blue moon, but not as consistently as we're seeing it right now. It's really frustrating, and I'm sure coaches are super frustrated with it too.
Well, if they are they working on it enough? I mean, as somebody that's been there, you've been in both positions as the passer and also the guy catching it, because you always have been a reliable free throw shooter. What's the solution?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's one of those things that it's hard to replicate end of game like that, especially when you're up, for instance. Yeah. It is tough to replicate, because even if lots of teams do that kind of a thing at practice, for sure. You usually finish practices with kind of scenario stuff, and again, the end of a practice is a lot different than the end of an actual game. There's a lot more on the line.
You can't replicate the same pressure, can you?
No, you can't. But again, that's why you've got to have guys that you know you can trust to throw the ball in. And a lot of it is on those guys throwing the ball in, but a lot of it does come down to the guys inbounds as well, and getting to the right spot and being able to hold your defender off properly and not let them shoot the gaps and that kind of a thing. And yeah, we're just not seeing that. It's pretty much just fundamentals, honestly. Other than that, it's because you don't need all these fancy plays or anything like that. You just need to be able to execute what you're running and set proper screens and be able to hold the guy on your back so you can lead yourself to the ball. And look, it's a lot of fundamentals that seems to be going out the window in these late games, unfortunately.
Well, let's keep an eye on it this week and see if we need to come back and revisit it, or see if somebody might be listening. Before we get to our preview of round 5, Cody, let's go back through our awards from round 4. The Damo Award, thanks to Damien Martin, the best defensive player. A little bit surprised Wani didn't get the 3 votes because of how good he was on Milton Doyle, but Damo liked the work of Mitch Norton and probably was happy for him to get that first win on the board. Yeah. So he got the 3 votes, Wani the 2, and Shayeli for that effort on Sunday against DJ as well. It's tough to argue, even though I think you can make a strong case for Wani to extend his lead.
I think you could make a case for all 3 of those guys to get the 3 votes, honestly. It was probably a bit of a flip of the coin. I think Nordo was unbelievable, and just not necessarily doing what Wani did and locking down the key defenders, but just leading defensively, leading his whole team. So I reckon that's probably where...
And like I said before, a couple of those offensive fouls that he got came at huge moments in the game too.
Yeah, and those kinds of plays just completely turn the game on their head, and especially at home, like that's momentum. On the road, that kills the crowd. Like it's just... Those kinds of plays, again, that's what Damo used to do all the time. But all 3 would have been deserving of 3 points, and you could make a case for all 3 of them for sure. Yeah. Nordo, like I said, kind of leading his whole team defensively, I think is probably where Damo would have separated him from everyone else. But always hard to argue with Damo, isn't it?
Player of the Year award votes, thanks to Simon Mitchell. So thank you to Simon in what's been a pretty grueling few days for still doing these votes. Bryce Cotton the 5, Tyrell Harrison the 4, Christian Doolittle the 3, Tyler Harvey the 2. So we've spoken about all those guys earlier. The one we haven't spoken about, Sean Bruce got the 1 vote. Yeah. A career best shooting day for him on Sunday. He knocked down all 6 of his 3-pointers. He had a tough start to the year, but gee, that's a hell of a way to break out of it.
Oh, he was awesome. With Adams out, he stepped up big time. Yep. And I've been saying it every week. There's going to be a time when Brucey shows himself, and he certainly did this week, right? Yep. He's too proven in this league, and we know what he gives, and he has games like this where he sees the rim like a hula hoop, and it was good to see. I'm glad for him because not that as a player you listen to too much of the noise, but there was a lot of backlash coming for him and Lee Arthur, and. Yes. Look, I'm glad that he had the game he did, and no more perfect time than when your starting point guard's out.
Yes, so. And like you said, with Lee Arthur as well, there's every chance he has a shooting game like that too, because we've seen that he's capable
so
of
many
it.
times.
Yeah,
absolutely. So look, again, Player of the Year. It's tough to argue with any of those guys, and all very well deserving.
And suddenly we feel like Bryce might have had a little bit of an up and down start, but he's sharing the leaderboard still already with Trey Cal, so those 2 huge games he's had, it's tough to argue with, isn't it?
Very much so.
Round 5 in the NBL, Cody. It's amazing we're 5 weeks into it already. It flies by once you get into the grind of it all. So thank you to TabTouch. We'll try and help you find some winners in this as well. So head to tabtouch.com.au or the TabTouch app. Starts Thursday night. The Brisbane Bullets back at home, looking to win for the first time in the Brisbane Entertainment Centre on the back of the win against the Phoenix, taking on the New Zealand Breakers, who they haven't lost yet this NBL season, but they also haven't played an NBL game for a long time. And they have had 3 big losses over the past week and a half in the US. They've been in Brisbane since Sunday, though, so they've had time to acclimatise. So they've had 4 days in Brisbane. They probably were in Brisbane before the Bullets were actually back in Brisbane. But it's going to be fascinating to see how they come out after their NBA trip. The Bullets are favourite on TabTouch 175. The Breakers 208. What do you think?
It's going to be a tough one. I think, gosh, if you're New Zealand, surely you wanted to go home for a few days, instead of flying straight into Brizzy.
Well, if you're doing the fixtures, surely you fixture them a home game before, don't
I know. It's difficult, and that's, we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago with the NBL, NBA crossover stuff, and just how it kind of really derails a season this early on, unfortunately. But it's going to be a good one. I think the fact that New Zealand has been back since Sunday is a good thing. I think it gives them a few days to acclimatise again. Yeah. It obviously takes you a little more than a few days to fully get back to normal. But this is going to be a good one because I'm excited to see New Zealand again. They were fun to watch those first couple games they played, and then obviously took off. Yeah. So Brizzy feeling good about themselves after getting the first win on the board, and like I mentioned before, that will just start to boost your confidence and you start feeling a bit better about yourselves, and then being able to come and play at home and hopefully the fans come out. And
let's hope they do on a Thursday night. 7,000 turnout was great first up, but let's hope that they get at least 5.
Yeah,
I would hope for this one.
Yeah, surely. And Thursday night games are always hard. Yeah, it is always hard. So I'm a bit torn with this one. I think that we're going to see New Zealand lose their legs a little in the second half, but I do think they get it. I'm gonna back New Zealand for this one.
Friday night, just the one game again. Tasmania Jack Jumpers, sort of at home. They're in Launceston against the Sydney Kings. So can the Jack Jumpers bounce back? They're $2.50 on Tap Touch. The Kings, you would think with Jalen Adams back, $1.53. What do you think?
Yeah, be interesting to see if Jalen Adams back. Back's a shocking issue to have. I've had plenty of issues with them, unfortunately. They're not something that gets fixed too quickly. So, especially the way he plays, I'm hoping that we do see him back, and it tightened up a little bit over the weekend.
Yeah. The flight from the other side of the country from Adelaide to Sydney wouldn't have helped.
Not ideal. Not ideal, but thankfully he's not a large human being, so that always makes it worse. Yeah. But look, Tassie plays different at home, but again, being in Lonnie, it's a little bit different. Yeah. I think the Kings have a bit too much firepower at this point, and Tassie is still just missing that piece. So I do think the Kings get this one.
2 games on Saturday. The New Zealand Breakers. I mean, this is horror scheduling. So the Wildcats will be back in Auckland before the Breakers are for this first home game. So it's a home game in name only, really, because they haven't been home for 3 weeks, and they have one day to prepare in it, and they have to play against a fresh Perth Wildcats who now haven't played for 9 days. Yep. Can they overcome it?
I don't think so. I think that's just, that's a tough one. And obviously, when you do go away for these trips, you have to make up the games that you've lost. Yeah. To throw a double header at them the weekend they come back is just rubbing salt into a wound, I think. Especially when you go away and you lose 3 games by 50 points. It's just demoralising. Yeah. I think the Cats are going to be too good for them and too well rested and just...
And at full strength,
full strength and in some decent form. I think they're just going to be too much for them.
Second up on Saturday, Cairns Taipans, and unless something has changed since Sunday, no Taran Armstrong or Tanner Groves again for the Cairns Taipans against the Illawarra Hawks, who are the hottest team in the league right now. So on Tap Touch, the Taipans 265, the Hawks are 148. Do you give the Taipans any chance?
It's tough without those two in. But look, Cairns and the Hawks always seem to have some decent bouts. So I think Cairns have got a little bit of the wood over the Hawks in recent times. So it'll be an interesting one. But you're right. I think the Hawks get it done. I just think they've got too much firepower. They're playing too well. It's going to be interesting to see how Wani goes against a bigger guard and bigger, stronger guard.
You've got to feel for Rob Edwards, don't you? He's going to find it tough to break out of that scoring slump from last week.
Well, he is, and it's but again for Wani, it's just that a bit of a different opponent in that bigger, stronger guard.
Sure.
It's going to test both of them, I think, and that's going to be a fun matchup to watch. But I think the Hawks get that one.
2 more games on Sunday. First up, the throwdown. It doesn't get any easier for Sam McKinnon taking on this job, does it? So Melbourne United, fresh off that huge win over Adelaide there. 121 on Tab Touch. The Phoenix are $4.30. Again, do you give the Phoenix any hope?
Those odds are pretty crazy. But look, I think it's going to be tough for them, unfortunately. And there's going to be some small little growing pains just with the new coach at the helm. So I think that Melbourne get it for sure, but hopefully we start to see some things turn the corner for the Phoenix. But I can't see them getting that one.
Last game of the round in Adelaide. So the Adelaide 36, they've had a full week to get over that grueling weekend they've just had. They're at home to the Tasmania Jack Jumpers, who fly over from Launceston on Friday night. This will be an interesting one. A lot on the line for both teams. What do you think?
Yeah, look, it's a tough backup for Tassie, a very tough backup, and Adelaide very good at home. Yes. So I think, what's that, 7 straight at home?
I think
Going back to last year now.
So and virtually all of them are sellout, over 9,000 people.
Yeah. So the Adelaide fans are some of the most loyal, and they come out in droves, and they're loud. They're loud. So it's a tough place to play, and it always has been. And I don't expect them to drop one at home this week either. So I do think they get it over Tassie.
All right, Cody, it's been another big show. These hours are getting very easy to fill at the moment, so I hope you all enjoyed tuning in. Check out Tab Touch to try and find a winner. We've got an exclusive for the Wildcats and Breakers on Saturday as well, so jump on that, and you don't even have to do any of the work. You just click the button, and Cody's done the work for you for that one. Okay, I'm Chris Pike. I'll wrap it up there, and I'll change it up this week, Cody, and why don't you give your thoughts on Jason Cadee reaching his 400th game to finish off the show this week?
Yeah, look, super proud of him. I think one of my favourite human beings, not just teammates. One of the good guys of the league, and to be able to reach 400 games after the horrific accident he had very early on. Very early on in his career is something that is super inspirational, and it just it fills me with joy that he's able to play his 400th. And to do it hopefully in front of a lot of his friends and family, and look, I'm super happy for him, and it's been a heck of a journey for him. It's been a lot of fun to watch and be a small part of, but look, very happy for him and his family.
Can you picture the first goal before the ball's even bounced? You might have the touch. When the weather's wet, can you feel who'll triumph? You've got the power. Can you read the footy future in the mullet of a full forward? Then you too might be harnessing the power of the touch. Got the touch? Download the Tab Touch app today.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.